Good morning, everybody. Delightful to see everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Hopefully, you might have seen yesterday's inaugural Facebook live stream for Pinnacle. To introduce myself, I'm Bron Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions. And as I said, welcome to our daily Facebook Live update. Pinnacle People Solutions provides HR services, human resource services and solutions to regionally based small to medium enterprises and not-for-profit organisations. And we're here to help you and your business through these challenging COVID-19 times. I'll be live at 9:15 every weekday with updates on new information and more detailed information about topics related to staffing and to business management. So please ask any questions you have as we go along, and I'll do my best to answer them. Outside of this, you can contact our team anytime via Facebook, email or telephone, and the details will be published in the so that you can see those. Okay, so I'm just going to move this screen around a little bit so that I can have everything where I need to have it. Okay, fantastic. So some breaking news, changes that have happened overnight or in the last 24 hours that we need to make sure that business owners are aware of. And that is that we have, just in general terms, 1,405 cases now of COVID-19 diagnosed cases in New South Wales. 145 of the transmissions of those cases, there is a transmission source unknown. And that is probably the largest concern at the moment, the increase in community transmission. And the Premier said this morning that the rate of this and hospital admissions will be large determinants of any further restrictions. So the advice for us as community members, business owners, employees, employers, is stay home and be hygienic. So following Wednesday night's National Cabinet meeting, we're still waiting on a promised national response to the need for relief for tenants and landlords to help see them through the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have seen some measures taken at the state level in terms of land tax, and there's this morning some announcements that have come out from the state government around relief on parking charges, and also small businesses with under 20 staff who are located in government-owned premises will have rent freeze periods. Yesterday, on the behalf of the Australian Council of Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, there's been a combined effort on the part of Australian Business Lawyers Australia and also employer and other employer and union groups to make an urgent consent application to the Fair Work Commission to make temporary amendments to the Clerks Private Sector Award. And that's in response to the crisis facing Australian business in the wake of COVID-19. Now, the Clerks Private Sector Award covers a significant number of staff as one of the 122 modern awards. And some of the changes that they're applying for the collective group of employee and employer representatives are to enable staff to be redeployed into other forms are suitable, but which might be outside or under their classification levels, and some flexibilities around leave, rostering and other things that would be in place for the duration of the pandemic to make organisation of work for employers and employees better, and people hopefully able to retain employment where otherwise it might be too constrained to do so. So we'll give you more information on that as it comes to hand. There have been some changes to the New South Wales Long Service Leave Act. And that is that employers no longer need to give a month's notice to take long service leave once they have accrued leave, and that's obviously at the 10-year service mark. if the employee agrees. So the employee and the employer can agree for the employee to take a pretty much immediate long, the employer needing to give a month's notice. And if an employer and employee agree to give and take leave in advance of the period of leave, that no longer needs to be a period of at least 1 month, but can be of a period shorter than a month. So we're starting to see some regulated flexibilities coming into some of the legislation around employment. And as I said, there's been an urgent consent application to vary the Clerk's Private Sector Award. So we will keep you very closely informed in respect of that. The other thing I would say as an aside, it's not an aside for most of us with children, but for those of you with children, dependent children, there's a very good kids guide to explaining COVID-19 and answering kids questions on the ABC website. So in our research, we discovered that this morning. And so for those of you parents who are struggling a little bit to try and explain what's happening and why in a way that that answers questions but doesn't unnecessarily alarm our little people, there's a very good guide up there to do that. So so the purpose of our live stream every morning is to give you a breaking news update in terms of how it impacts, what the things are that are happening and how they might impact employers and employees. So we will keep doing that every morning. If we do have significant developments over the weekend, which is perfectly likely, then we will consider doing an emergency live update. And we'll obviously on a Monday morning preview all of the things that have changed over the weekend. But if we feel there's a need to do an emergency live update for employers and employees, we will do that. And we'll obviously do that on our Facebook page. So today's spotlight topic is restructuring and or reducing staff. And as you know, our company particularly specialises in supporting regionally based small to medium enterprises and not-for-profit organisations. And one of the things I would say to you after having spent the majority of the last 12 months working with regionally based business to restructure and refocus, and in some instances, in a lot of instances, reduce their staffing, as a consequence of drought and bushfire impacts. One of the things I can say with absolute confidence is that this is an incredibly difficult thing, and I want to acknowledge this, for regionally based business to do, to make decisions to do. More often than not in regionally based business, you know your staff and their families incredibly well. In a lot of cases, people have worked with you for a lot longer than they would have necessarily in a metro organisation, and the prospect of somebody having a significant cut to their income or to lose their job threatens the potential or people feel that it threatens the potential for them to remain living and working in regional areas. It's a little bit different in metro, not that it's not traumatic, of course, whenever those situations happen, but it's a little bit different if you've got the prospect of finding meaningful alternate work within commutable distance of your home and your social networks and your kids' schooling and all of those things. People who live and work in regional areas are acutely aware around job security, and business owners are acutely aware around the impact of making any of those changes. Unfortunately, what I do see and what we see as a team is that sometimes business owners will avoid doing and taking actions that they really, really need to take now because they're fearful. The problem with that is that avoiding making changes to business as usual can potentially jeopardise the entire enterprise and the jobs of everybody, not just the jobs of what might, if you be a few. So I want to acknowledge that up front, because I realise how challenging and difficult it is, and we are here to walk side by side at 1.5 meters distance, and certainly virtually, with small to medium enterprises and not-for-profit organisations, to help them navigate the changes they need to make, whether it's trading one day, not trading the next, staged restructuring, stand downs, redundancies, whatever they might be. So some of the questions to ask yourselves, I guess, as business owners and managers, first up is, can I keep doing business as usual? And in the vast majority of cases at this present moment in time, as a consequence of the pandemic, and certainly we've seen this in response to drought, and the worst drought on record, and bushfire impacts in the last 12 months, the answer to that is no. Business as usual is not business as usual anymore, and it certainly isn't for the vast majority of businesses. So the first question is, can I keep doing business as usual? And if the answer to that is no, which in most cases it will be, what are my options? And some of the questions that would relate around that would be, is there a stoppage of work, first and foremost? And in some cases, in some industries, in some businesses, parts or all of their business have been operating one day and not been allowed to operate the following day. So yes, there has been a stoppage of work. And the last few days, we've been working with clients, industries, to do fairly widespread stand downs of staff, and making sure that organisations are communicating appropriately with their staff and providing the necessary information, and also liaising appropriately and reporting as required Australia, and meeting all of their obligations in respect of letting staff go, or at least standing them down for a period of time. So is there a stoppage of work? Is the first question. And the second question is it for a reason that is reasonably outside of your control? Now, obviously, if that the government has given a directive must not operate either at all or in a certain form, then the answer to that is pretty clear. But there are a whole range of other businesses at the moment who are struggling to deliver their goods and services in ways that are not business as usual. Some are achieving that, others it's not possible. So in the vast majority of cases at the moment, the answer to that question, is it for a reason that is reasonably outside of your control? The answer is yes. And the final question you need to consider in terms of can I keep doing business as usual is, can the affected employees be employed to perform usual work? So can you redeploy them to other tasks in your business for a temporary period of time, or in order to re-engineer your business model to deliver in different ways? If there is a stoppage of work, in part or in full, and there is a possibility to do a staged reduction in staff, a staged stand down potentially, or staged redundancies, then and if the reason is outside of your control, and if you can't employ employees doing other meaningful work within your business, and you therefore decide that your only option at this point is redundancies, it's important to remember that there are 3 requirements for genuine redundancy to best avoid any claims of unfair dismissal or adverse action. And the business must no longer require that job to be done by anyone because of changes in operational requirements. That doesn't mean that you mightn't divert some of the duties of that role to somebody else's role, or to another role, or that you might not, restructure as in all of the way that you're doing things and the duties of different positions, and that might mean that some positions are no longer required. You must consult with your staff who are covered by a modern award or an enterprise agreement. We would also argue that you should do the same kind of consultation for award-free staff. Even though it's not required, the consultation provisions are in modern awards, and not everybody is covered by a modern award. However, in the interest of doing the appropriate and right an ethical thing in terms of communicating with your staff, we would encourage you to do that with all of your staff. And any redundancies must be reasonable in all the circumstances. And that is where you've already considered whether it's possible to redeploy staff to other areas of your business. If you do have to implement redundancies, you need to consider your obligation to provide redundancy pay, notice of termination, and any other statutory or contractual entitlements. And that includes paying out accrued annual leave and long service leave. If you are a business, however, that is under 15 headcount, that is not full-time equivalent staff, that is headcount, then you are not obligated under the Fair Work Act and the National Employment Standards to pay weeks per years of service, the redundancy component. You are required to pay notice of termination. What I want to say, and please feel free to ask questions, and I will answer them as I can going through, or I will put them on notice and have answers for you on Monday. I have some questions to answer from yesterday, which I will do in just a moment. But one of the things I want to come back to that I started this with is that changing business as usual is the new norm. I would really try and encourage employers, particularly to get on the phone, have a meeting. Let's talk about what's happening with your business and what you might need to do and do now, and be proactive, because we have seen a lot of change this week. We're seeing a lot of things move every 24 hours, and the more you can be slightly ahead of that and planning for to deliver your service and what that means in terms of your engine room, which is your staffing, the better you're going to be. So pick up the phone and have that conversation. Be proactive. As I said, it's very difficult, I know, for regionally based business to do this because there are so many factors involved that perhaps don't apply when it's a metro-based business. Areas where you know people, they've worked with you for a long time, you're worried about the fact that you're going to potentially come across them, albeit at a appropriate social distance. So I acknowledge all of those things, and we see and feel that with our clients every day, but it is really important to get on the front foot, very important. So in terms of some of the things I guess I wanted to put as things to consider when you're thinking about the structure and delivery of your business moving forward is some of the questions, I guess, that I've pre-prepared to answer for you, which you might well have. I'm going to go through, and then I'm going to take you through the steps that you need to do if you're looking to potentially restructure your business, whether that involves losing staff, standing them down, changing hours, rosters, shifts, the ways of work. We'll talk about the processes for that. So the first question that I guess I anticipated was, can I reduce the hours of my casual employees as business falls off? And the answer to that is yes. This operates just, the current situation is no different to any other situation that falls off. It's really good practice to be talking to your casual staff and explaining what's happening and what, if any, work options they might have and when work might pick up, which might be a crystal ball gazing exercise at the moment. But you need to balance the short and longer term needs of the business and keeping important casual employees with some income may be a key issue when the pandemic ends, especially if they're your star, if they're a particular employee. So also the government, as I mentioned in yesterday's live broadcast, has introduced income relief for those who, including casuals, who may have lost more than 20% of their income. And if their income is under $1,100 a fortnight, which is the combination now of the job seeker allowance at $550 a fortnight and the COVID supplement, which is $550 a fortnight, then they can potentially get income supplementation through those means. So it's important to remember that. I've got a couple of questions which I might defer to before I go into the next question. And Josh has asked, how do you see an event like this changing the way that employee contracts are written? Yeah, well, we've got a lot of fast learning happening at the moment, Josh. Thank you for that question. It's probably a bit of a crystal ball gazing exercise at the moment, but the fact that we're seeing things like emergency requests for temporary changes to awards, at least the private sector award, I suspect that won't be the only one that we see, and we'll see how the Fair Work Commission responds to that. I think we will possibly see changes to the way that employees are engaged in the future based on our experiences and learnings coming out of this process. And I guess that's going to be a wait and see, and a very interesting area to see develop, and we'll obviously comment on that as we see things emerge. Thank you for that question. Michelle has asked the question, what's the difference between redundancy and standing employees down? Why would I choose one over the other? There is a big difference, and we are actually going to be running a special topic next week on standing employees down. Standing down employees is permissible under the Fair Work Act, and the intention of that provision is that it'll only be for a temporary period of time. You may not know at this point what that period of time is going to be, simply because of the unusual circumstances. But the stand down provisions imply that at some point in the future, when it's feasible to do so, you will bring those employees back and you will have an operating workforce again. The government has introduced the option for stand down employees with no income, stood down employees with no income, to get access to income support. So while they're still considered your employees, they're still going to be able to get income relief. The government wants to, or is stating that it wants to make sure that businesses are able to ramp back up again when that's possible, using the staff that they've had. So stand down is quite different. Redundancy is simply you do not require the job to be done in that current form at the moment, and so it's the job that's redundant, it's not the person. Sometimes we confuse the two. So in a business you might have 3 salespeople, business has dropped off, you now only need 2. Or it might be that you've got a job that does a range of different duties, and a number of people's level of volume of duty has dropped off, and you're removing that. You don't need that position anymore, and some of the elements of that job you're going to give to this person over here who's got capacity, or that person over there. So that's actually removing jobs out of your work environment that no longer need to be done, whereas stand down implies that the jobs are still there and are going to need to be done at some point, but you can't afford to have the staff. You have a stoppage of work, which I explained a moment ago. So I hope that answers those 2 questions. Please feel free. I'm going to keep scrolling up here. Jess has asked, can you reduce the hours of full-time or part-time staff? Can you reduce full-time hours to job share roles? The answer to that question is yes. Jess, thank you for asking that. In fact, that was going to be my next question that I'd pre-prepared. To keep staff employed, should I ask my employees to consider other arrangements, including moving them to part-time, casual, or another variation to the terms of their employment as an alternative to redundancy? And the answer to that, as suggested by Jess's question, is yes. I ask your employees to consider other arrangements which still would be subject to their agreement. So I need to be really clear about that. You can't make those changes unilaterally. You have to talk to your staff and get agreement. You would ordinarily approach the employees, explain the situation, including that you're looking for alternatives to ensure the viability of the business going forward. An agreement could be for a set period, it could be open-ended, or it could be contingent on the cessation of the current COVID pandemic. This would not require a formal variation to their employment contracts. However, you should not introduce the prospect of redundancies or any other potential adverse action as a potential ramification should agreement not be reached. So you can't kind of shoehorn your employees into doing something they otherwise wouldn't normally agree to. That could be perceived to be adverse action, and that's really important to remember. And it could expose you and your business to legal liability. So you have to be very careful in how you communicate around this. but the answer to the question is yes, you can reduce hours. You have to get your staff's agreement. And this goes to the fact that you should be talking to your staff very frequently at the moment about what's happening and getting their thoughts and perspectives. Now, I'm conscious that we have only 3 minutes left in our segment today. There are what more creative things might I do to get through this with my employees? There are lots of things that might be worth considering at different times. You might look at split rosters or reduce who's in the office at any one time. We've got trades businesses that are running split teams that never cut across each other and that maintain the social distancing. Working from home, and that's in fact our topic for Monday, or actually not working from home, working remotely. Moving to virtual meetings with customers or clients, incentivising annual leave. You might say to a staff member, listen, if you take 3 weeks of your annual leave, we'll give you a 4th. Reducing exposure to people having to travel by public transport or provide parking or carpooling, although we're getting to the point where we're all being instructed to stay at home as far as we absolutely can, and only travel for essential reasons. Provide some support to employees who have to attend the workplace, which reduces community exposure, such as providing or buying in lunch for them. Exploring whether part-time work options may suit anyone for a period. A moment ago. Possibly changing operating hours to reflect changes in demand. That might involve an individual flexibility agreement, and we can help you with that. Temporary variations to contracted hours of work by agreement. You might look at more targeted recognition and reward programs for those frontline workers carrying the business through this pandemic. And you may need to make an application under Section 120 of the Fair Work Act to defer or reduce redundancy payments, and that's an option. One of the things that I've had businesses asking me is, look, I've got book value of all of the leave that is accrued by my staff, but if they all go on paid leave and take it, I don't think my business can stay afloat. I've encouraged them to talk to their accountant about it. The government has said that they will guarantee 50% of business loans up to $250,000. You may need to look at going into to meet those obligations, but I'm not a finance expert, so please talk to your accountant and your bank managers around that. So what to do next? Consult with staff. Do lots and lots and lots of that, please. If you are looking to do structural changes, including if you're looking to grow your business, because when we're talking about restructuring, we can also be talking about ramping up, and we're talking to businesses who are planning and doing that as we speak as well. These are the proactive businesses who are looking at ways in which they can be reinventing themselves to survive. You need to consult with staff. You need to arrange a meeting, confirm it in writing, keep records of the meeting, ask staff for any suggestions, tell them what you think you need to do. Ask them for suggestions as to how you might reduce costs, change the business model, etc. You need to consider any feedback under the consultation provisions. You don't need to agree to anything that's suggested, but you must and actively consider it. You need to meet again with staff once you've decided what you're going to do. Tell them the outcome. If you've decided, if you have to decide between staff in terms of making reductions, make sure that it's a fair and transparent process that you use. And then step 2 is to implement changes, whether that's to rosters, shifts, hours, stand downs, redundancies. We've explained the difference between those. Everything must be in writing, and you must make sure that you meet your obligations. We are always here to help. We are 24/7 reachable. Our contact information is in the comments. Some questions just quickly. I realise we're over time, so I'm going to be very quick. Questions we had last week was, do staff need to take paid leave before they're stood down? The answer to that question is, as an employer, you must give staff the option to do that. Staff may, in some businesses that we're working with at the moment, have said, no, I actually want to keep that as a nest egg, thank you. I don't want to take it. They're stood down, that is still preserved for them. During the stand down period as well, you continue to accrue leave. So Are there any other form of unpaid period of time in that you do accrue leave and it is considered a period of service? Some of the other questions I had was, I'm a sole operator. I deal a lot with clients, but I don't have staff. Do I still need an epidemic and pandemic policy? The answer to that is most definitely yes. Your business needs to be on the front foot and clear with your clients and your staff about how you are operating and managing and meeting all of your directives and obligations during this period of time. So Monday morning's session is going to be on working remotely. We will have emergency live updates over the weekend where that's necessary, and we'll update you again on Monday morning as to any developments over the weekend. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have specific questions relating to your business or you want us, can you contact us? Please contact us anytime by email. As I said, Monday will be focused on working remotely. Please invite your colleagues and friends. In the meantime, stay safe, wash your hands, lots, and I'll look forward to seeing you on Monday. We will publicise if we're going to do any live events over the weekend. But of course, everything as has happened yesterday and today will be recorded. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please stay safe and well.